health. Deep, deep angst, I'm sure.
Deep.
Then we think of King David, who a friend of ours will say that, I mean, he's almost seemingly bipolar at times, the way he can go up and down, up and down. Maybe he had mental illness, and that to me is not a sign of depravity. It's bound up with our biology, and we don't tend to associate, do we, that if we have a biological problem, therefore we're in sin. I mean, yeah, we could talk about sin, depravity, physical, problems and such in a general sense, but if someone has cancer, if someone has diabetes, or a broken leg, we don't tend to think, oh, you've got sin in your life. Pastor Tom Shive, who's a good friend of ours, has said, the church, as a pastor, he has said, the church is really good at dealing with problems from the neck down, but not from the neck up. And we both agree that the brain is an organ, just like all our other bodily organs, and so depression bound up with the brain is often, if not always, associated with certain biological functions. Could you speak to that?
Oh yes, I want to go
to
brain here now,
Okay.
Paul. You can take care of the theology, but I want to talk about the brain, because you just don't get along very well without one.
I've been trying.
You got to start with the fact that a human person is a strongly integrated mixture of physical, biological functions and symbolic cultural functions that have been the sign that the human being has been made in the image of God. No matter how mysterious that is, somehow the human being has something more than the biology that makes up the total person. But without the biology, without the brain, what's with the rest of the person? It's not there. Now that gets us into other questions about bodily resurrection and so on, which we're not concerned about today. But when we're talking about humans living on the earth, we have a brain that is functioning up there with a very large number of nerve cells. You can come up with numbers like 10 to the 10th and so on, but nobody's actually counted them all. What we know is there are an enormous number of brain cells. In addition to that, there are fibers connecting cells so that any one cell could have as many as 500,000 connections to other cells. The network of connections, so that your brain is humming all the time. It never turns off, even when you're deep asleep or even when you're anesthetized. The brain is still working because those neurons are constantly stimulating one another. There was a very interesting experiment, which I always cherished reading about it, when a Canadian neurosurgeon by the name of Wyler Penfield was exploring the brain in a person wide awake. And he touched an electrode to a certain part in the memory section, and the man said, "I hear my mother calling me to supper when I was 5 years old." What that tells you is, oddly enough, your whole life is going on all the time. And the memory bank is constantly spinning itself, constantly revising itself. The stories I tell about my own history, my wife tells me they have been what we call plastic. They've been quite fluid. As I tell stories, they'll grow in size or shrink in size or get a little bit different nuance each time. Because my brain, in fact, is recreating my history, my memory all the time. But it's who I am, it's what I am, and it's going on all the time, deep down inside of us. And you don't have to be a Freudian to understand that the unconscious part of our mind, always working, always sending messages up into the rest of the conscious area of the mind, it's always influencing who we are and how we feel. And so you wake up one day in what? A mood. And you can't quite understand what it's about. That mood, and the way I understand the brain's function, is rising up out of that unconscious material that's been stored there the whole of your life and is now just seeping through and coming into your life. Now, the depressed person the person who is feeling that mood so intensely that they're having trouble functioning, having trouble thinking clearly, having trouble sleeping, can't accomplish their task day by day, feel like life is less and less valuable each day. That folks who are thinking that way are really living through those parts of their life that drag them down. Mm-hmm. Now, our brain has its own protective functions, and many of the chemicals, of which there are over 100 different kinds of, I can only remember 4 right now, so don't quiz me on that too tightly. But one in particular called serotonin. Mm-hmm. When serotonin amounts are decreased in the brain, that measured decrease is often associated with a sense of depression. Mm-hmm. So that is one example where some of the physical, biological activity of our brain can be associated with. You can't exactly call it the cause of, but they're associated together. And what we know is if you give a medicine that stimulates the production of serotonin, the mood rises. So an antidepressant that does that job can give us a different mood. Again, we're not sure exactly what's causing what, but they are associated. Mm-hmm. So we feel like for many people, the sense of depression is in part a biological phenomenon. The biology sort of sets the stage. The memories that are always there that can emerge, all of that is a setup for this sense that life is not good. Now, I think we have some good protective devices to deal with that when life comes to us as not good and we don't feel like we want to live it as we had been. There are ways in which